Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll start with correspondence.
There is some.
Okay. Easy. Next, we'll open it to the public if they have any questions on resolutions that are on today's agenda that weren't subject to a public hearing. Bill Maestro, I see that you've lit up your screen. Does that mean you wish to speak? Oh, you're muted again. Bill, you're muted. Bill, did you have something to say about one of the resolutions?
No. I will be coming to the meeting later to speak on something else, on one of the public hearing
Okay.
things.
Okay, all right. Okay,
I just signed on.
Oh, okay, we'll be turning your video off until then. Okay, if there's no one else, then Liz, if you want to get us started with resolutions.
Yep. Whereas Julia Hubbard, 23 Smith Street, has petitioned the town of Shelter Island for permission to install a stake, mooring, and pulley system at the location designated at latitude 41.058881 north and longitude 72.341018 west. Now therefore be resolved that pursuant to section 90-5 of the town code of the town of Shelter Island, a public hearing will be held at 6 p.m. or as soon thereafter prevailing time on the 18th day of May, 2026, in the Shelter Island Town Hall, Shelter Island, New York, for all interested persons to be heard in favor or in opposition to the proposed installation. So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Whereas pursuant to Shelter Island Town Code, Section 109, the Shelter Island History Museum of 16 South Ferry Road, Suffolk County Tax Map Number 700-19-2-88, has submitted a site plan review application to expand their existing commercial use on the property by renovating and upgrading the existing accessory storage barn, adding a sprinkler and fire alarm system, and converting the building to habitable space. Now therefore be it resolved that the town board hereby calls for a public hearing to be held 6 p.m. or soon thereafter prevailing time on the 18th day of May, 2026, in the Shelter Island Town Hall, Shelter Island, New York, for all interested persons to be heard in favor of or in opposition to the proposed application. So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Whereas Ian Thompson and Jennifer Coughlin, One Landing Lane, Suffolk County Tax Map Number 700-18-4-13, has petitioned the town of Shelter Island for permission to remove an existing 13-foot by 16-foot ramp, a 3-foot by 10-foot upland ramp, a 4-foot by 16-foot dock, and a 6-foot by 20-foot float, and to construct a 4-foot by 12-foot ramp and a 4-foot by 120-foot fixed pier dock with a 400-foot by 20-foot L at the end with through flow decking, and to provide water and electric on the dock, and to remove invasive bamboo within the property boundary as per plan submitted by Cole Environmental Services dated March 7th, 2024, and revised July 25th, 2025. Now therefore be it resolved that pursuant to section 53-7J of the Code of the Town of Shelter Island, a public hearing will be held at 6 p.m. or soon thereafter prevailing time on the 8th day of June, 2026, in the Shelter Island Town Hall, Shelter Island, New York, for all interested persons to be heard in favor of or in opposition to the proposed application. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Whereas Ingrid and Robert Fagan, 1 Tower Kettle Road, Suffolk County Tax Map 700-23-1-28.3, have petitioned the town of Shelter Island for a permit to construct a staircase leading up to a 4 by 20-foot fixed catwalk leading to a 4 by 50-foot ramp down to a 4 by 26-foot kayak launch, and installed 2 ladders as per plan submitted by Costello Marine, last revised December 3rd, 2025, and approved by the New York State DEC on January 16, 2026. And whereas on April 6, 2026, a public hearing was held on the subject application where public comments were received and taken under consideration, And whereas the subject application was referred to the Waterways Management Advisory Council and the report was taken into consideration, now therefore be it resolved that pursuant to NYCRR 617.5C, Section 9 of the State Environmental Quality Review Act, this application is deemed a Type 2 action. And be it further resolved that the town clerk is hereby authorized to issue a permit for the aforementioned construction as per plans prepared by Costello Marine dated December 3, 2025, subject to the following conditions. Number one, after said applicant has filed with the town clerk certificate that the owner has at least $300,000 liability insurance on the location and operations covered by said permit, a copy of the contractor's current home improvement license, and a certificate from the contractor performing the operations covered by said permit that said contractor has an owner's contractor's policy issued in favor of the town of Shelter Island for the liability limits of at least $500,000 covering operation of the contractor pursuant to said permit, and that this kayak launch is to be used for non-motorized vessels catwalk access only as approved by the New York State DEC on January 16, 2026. Bear with me. Be it further resolved that said operation shall be completed within 2 years from the date of issuance of this permit, and said permit is subject to the recommended limitations and any requirements that may be necessary under the New York State DEC, the Army Corps of Engineers, and any other agencies having jurisdiction. So moved.
Second?
I'll do a roll call vote on this one. Amber Brock Williams, yes. Margaret Larson?
Aye.
Benjamin's not here. Albert Dixon?
Opposed, on the grounds that I have stated many times, but I wish to repeat them. There's only one other dock other than the town dock in Dickerson Creek. And I think this is a bucolic setting that doesn't need a dock right up against Midway Road on the property adjacent to it. There's Turkham's Rest, CPF property across the street that abuts Fresh Pond. It has a marine estuary in it with a pipe that runs under Midway Road. Tuttle Needham property is on the east bank. This is not a place, I shouldn't call it a dock, it's a kayak launch. It's a kayak launch. It's not a place for a kayak launch. And so I remain opposed.
Stanley?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Whereas the Town of Shelter Island Town Board is considering the acquisition of real property at 2 School Street, subject property, and whereas the Town Board has not identified any specific plans for future use, redevelopment, or improvement of subject property, and thus no physical changes to the site are proposed, and whereas pursuant to 6 NYCRR 617.4, 6 NYCRR 617.5, and 60-12B of the Town Code of the Town of Shelter Island Town Code, and the Town Board reviewed the proposed action and has preliminarily determined that the same is an unlisted action, and whereas the Town Board has determined that it is the only involved agency, and now therefore be it resolved that the Town Board hereby designates itself as the lead agency pursuant to the implementing regulations of the State Environmental Quality Review Act, specifically 6 NYCRR 617.6B1, with respect to the above described proposed action. So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Whereas the Town of Shelter Island Town Board is considering the acquisition of the real property at 2 School Street in the Town of Shelter Island subject property, and whereas the Town Board has not identified any specific plans for the future use, development, or improvement of the subject property, and thus no physical changes to the site are proposed, whereas the Town Board declared itself lead agency for the proposed action pursuant to the implementing regulations of the State Environmental Quality Review Act, specifically 6 NYCRR 617.6B1, and whereas the environmental review has included preparations of Part 1, 2, and 3 of the Short Environmental Assessment Form, SEAF, now therefore be it resolved that the Town Board as lead agency for the action contemplated herein after review of the proposed action in 6 NYCRR .66 Part 617, hereby determines that the above described project is an unlisted action. Okay, and be it further resolved that based upon the information contained in the SEAF and other relevant information, the town board as lead agency for the action contemplated herein, and after due deliberation, review, and analysis, hereby determine that the proposed action will not result in significant adverse impact to the environment, and hereby adopts the annexed negative declaration. So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
I'm reading the same.
Whereas the town board placed a winning bid at the foreclosure auction for 2 School Street, Shelter Island, Suffolk County Tax Map Number 700-15-3-47, and whereas the proposed purchase price for fee simple acquisition of the subject property is $791,000 plus survey, title, prorated tax, and recording charges, and whereas the town board finds pursuant to section 64(2) of the town law that acquisition of the subject property is in the best interests of the town of Shelter Island, now therefore be it resolved that the supervisor is hereby authorized and directed to execute any documents on behalf of the town of Shelter Island for the purpose of acquiring the property at a cost not to exceed $791,000 plus reasonable survey, title, prorated tax, and recording charges. And be it further resolved that all monies to be expended for the foregoing property shall be funded by the A 8660.2 Acquisition of Real Property Expenditure Code. So moved.
Second. Discussion.
Yep.
Acquisition of real property expenditure code. Just for myself, I've made it abundantly clear that I think the purchase of this property should come out of the Community Housing Fund. And I don't approve of any other way to purchase this property. Is there any?
I personally would like to see us proceed down this route. So we're pulling it from general fund for the moment. And then once we go through the facilities master plan and we consider all town properties and how they're being used, we can then make a determination whether to proceed with keeping it for general municipal purposes or kick it over to the Community Preservation Fund and then reimburse the A fund for that.
Okay.
So, and I want to make sure that we do that by the early fall, September, because we're pulling it out of fund balance for the moment. And then by early fall, we can make the decision if we're going to use it for general municipal purposes, and we'd want to take advantage of the bond anticipation note that we had authorized earlier this year, so that we could get that executed by the end of the year, or by fall, make the decision to move it to a CPF, and a community housing asset.
I understand what you're saying. I'm not in agreement. I think we should right now take it out of the Community Housing Fund. I don't see how it possibly could be usable for anything else than housing.
All right, I'm in favor of continuing as is. So if there's no further discussion, I'll do a roll call vote. Myself, yes. Margaret Larson?
Yes.
Benjamin is absent. Albert Dixon?
Opposed,
Elizabeth Hanley?
Yes.
Motion carried.
with clarification.
Federico, can you make sure that we're live streaming? It thinks that we're not live. It says that we are, okay.
Albert, you have the next resolution.
Whereas the town of Shelter Island is considering the acquisition of approximately 6.2 acres of vacant land located Cobbetts Lane, Shelter Island Heights, 700-3-1-7.1. And
Sorry, let me interrupt. I think we have to pull this resolution as of this afternoon. We didn't have a signed contract back.
Oh, okay, okay.
Sorry, I waited to see if Gail got us a
Oh.
signed contract and we don't have one.
Okay,
Okay.
So we'll have to pull
so
it.
move on to the next one.
okay.
Okay.
I think we'll just switch over to Liz, because I've already written down which ones I'm reading, and
Okay.
I go through ahead of the meeting, and
You get a freebie, Albert.
I get a pass, if that's okay with you.
Okay.
Whereas the town of Shelter Island hereinafter the town believes that the lack of housing for New York residents of all ages and income levels negatively impacts the future of New York State's economic growth and community well-being. And whereas the housing crisis has negative effects at regional and local levels, we believe that every community must do their part to contribute to housing growth and benefit from the positive impacts a healthy housing market brings to communities. And whereas we believe that supporting housing production of all kinds in our community will bring multiple benefits, including increasing housing access and choices for current and future residents, providing integrated, accessible housing options that meet the needs of people with sensory and mobility disabilities, bringing economic opportunities and vitality to our communities, and allowing workers at all levels to improve their quality of life through living closer to their employment opportunities. And whereas we believe that evidence showing that infill development that reduces sprawl and supports walkable communities has significant environmental and public health benefits, and whereas we believe that affirmatively furthering fair housing and reducing segregation is not only required by law, but is essential for keeping our community strong and vibrant. Now therefore be it resolved that the town of Shelter Island, in order to take positive steps to alleviate the housing crisis, adopts the Pro-Housing Communities Pledge, which will have its endeavor to take the following important steps. Number one, streamlining permitting for multifamily housing, affordable housing, accessible housing, accessory dwelling units, and supportive housing. Number two, adopting policies that affirmatively further fair housing. Three, incorporating regional housing needs into planning decisions. Four, increasing development capacity for residential uses. Number five, enacting policies that encourage a broad range of housing development, including multifamily housing, affordable housing, accessible housing, accessory dwelling units, and supportive housing. So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Discussion.
Oh, discussion, okay.
Thomas, there's a question for you. Shouldn't this be subject to a public hearing? I mean, we're modifying zoning conditions and town codes that we have. Shouldn't this be a public hearing
I don't
for
believe
New York State?
I don't believe this modifies any part of the town code. Like, there's no,
It's aspirational.
there's no section of the town code that's impacted by this.
Okay, all right. We have an application in front of the ZBA for an accessory dwelling unit in the nearshore overlay right now. That kind of flies in the face of town code.
But this is not.
This isn't impacting
Yeah.
that. They have nothing to do with each other.
Okay, well, all right, isn't it prudent to have a public hearing? Wouldn't that be prudent to be transparent and have people comment?
We've been talking about this for,
We do public hearings for legislative changes.
Yeah.
This isn't a legislation change. It's just a resolution.
I understand, but wouldn't it be the prudent thing to do, to have a public hearing for this?
We have
It
allowed,
affects the island community.
we have allowed public comment at work sessions when we brought this topic up.
All right. Okay, I don't agree, but
Okay, should I do a roll call?
sure.
Okay. All right, we'll start. I'll start with you first, Liz.
aye.
Aye.
I am an aye. Benjamin's absent, and Albert.
Opposed.
Motion carried.
Okay, whereas Jenny Landy Productions at 207 3 Mile Harbor HC Road, East Hampton, New York, has requested a filming permit for May 11th, 12th, 13th, 2026 at 8 Cheekwood Avenue from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. And whereas the $500 minor filming application fee has been received, and whereas the filming crew consists of 15 persons, 2 Sprinter vans, and 4 cars, and whereas said application has been reviewed by the police department, the highway department, and the police department has recommended that all vehicles be parked on the location property at 8 Cheekwit, and that no vehicle should be parked on the shoulder of the road. And the highway department recommends that there must not be any obstructions on the roadways, and all garbage must be picked up in the area. And now therefore, be it resolved that the town clerk is hereby authorized and directed to issue the aforementioned filming permit upon receipt of these following fees. 3 days minor filming fee, $3,000, and refundable cleanup deposit, $1,000. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Whereas pursuant to section 31H of the Public Officers Law, a town officer must sign and file constitutional oath of office within 30 days after the term of office begins. And whereas the below persons have not yet signed and filed said constitutional oath of office, and whereas the town board desires to have the below persons serve the town of Shelter Island in their designated capacities, now therefore be it resolved that the town board hereby appoints the following the below persons to their designated positions. Brigham Catherine, Recreational Specialist Instructor, Noel Cunningham, Board of Assessment Review, Edward Cotta, Volunteer Recreation Department, Sarah Lewis, Planning Board, Nadine Malley, Community Housing Board, Bo Payne, Detention Attendant, Catherine Rasmussen, Detention Attendant, and Gerard Siller, Enhanced Mobility Driver. So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Whereas the term of Scott Campbell as a member of the Deer and Tick Committee will expire on June 24, 2026, and whereas Dr. Campbell has expressed willingness to continue to serve in said capacity, now therefore be it resolved that Scott Campbell is hereby reappointed to serve as a member of the Deer and Tick Committee for a term to expire on June 24, 2029. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Whereas the term of Julia Weisenberg as a member of the Deer and Tick Committee will expire on June 24, 2026, and whereas Ms. Weisenberg has expressed willingness to continue to serve in said capacity, now therefore be it resolved that Julia Weisenberg is hereby appointed to serve as a member of the Deer and Tick Committee for a term to expire on June 24, 2029. So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Whereas the term of James Eklund as a member of the Waterways Management Advisory Council expired on February 1st, 2025, and whereas Mr. Eklund has expressed willingness to continue to serve in said capacity, now therefore be resolved that James Eklund is hereby reappointed to serve as a member of the Waterways Management Advisory Council for a term to expire on February 1st, 2028. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Whereas the term of James Eklund as a member of the chairman of the Water Quality Improvement Advisory Board expired on February 1st, 2025, and whereas Mr. Eklund has expressed willingness to continue to serve in said capacity, now therefore be it resolved that James Eklund is hereby reappointed to serve as a member and chairman of the Water Quality Improvement Advisory Board for a term to expire on February 1st of 2028. So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Whereas the term of Tom Field as a member on the Waterways Management Advisory Council expired on February 1st, 2025, and whereas Mr. Field has expressed willingness to continue to serve in said capacity, now therefore be it resolved that Tom Field is hereby reappointed to serve as a member of the Waterways Management Advisory Council for a term to expire on February 1st, 2028. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Whereas the term of Kathy Gooding as a member of the Taylor's Island Preservation and Management Committee expired on February 2nd, 2026, and whereas Ms. Gooding has expressed willingness to continue to serve in said capacity, now therefore be it resolved that Kathy Gooding is hereby reappointed to serve as a member of the Taylor's Island Preservation and Management Committee for a term to expire on December 13th, 2028. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Resolved that Julia Weisenberg is hereby appointed to serve as a part-time Justice Court Clerk for 15 hours per week at the hourly rate of $27 as of April 30th, 2026. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Whereas the town board established the Taylor's Island Preservation and Management Committee in 2005, and whereas no prior resolution established the number of members serving on the committee, and whereas the town board finds it necessary to define the committee's membership in order to establish a quorum, now therefore be it resolved that the town board of the town of Shelter Island hereby establishes that the Taylor Island Preservation and Management Committee shall consist of 7 members for the purposes of determining a quorum. So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Whereas the town board of the town of Shelter Island seeks to establish an internal working public safety task force whose purpose is to review proposed legislation to promote public safety, peace, and good order associated with federal immigration policy for the purpose of advising the town board, and whereas said task force shall convene as necessary and be disbanded when such legislation is adopted or rejected, now therefore be it resolved that the Public Safety Task Force is hereby established and shall consist of the following members to be appointed: Town Supervisor Amber Brock Williams, Town Board Member Elizabeth Hanley, Chief of Police James Reed or his designee, Health and Wellness Committee Member Gina Kraus, Health and Wellness Committee Member Victoria Shields. So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
discussion.
Uh-huh.
What, I don't, we currently have legislation and police policy in place that we've heard and reviewed with the chief repeatedly. And as a town board, we are the police commissioners. So what is the need for this, and what is this group tasked with?
This group is tasked with just looking at the legislation that's been proposed, the OLA legislation is being called, amongst the 5 eastern towns. So that committee will, that task force will look at the legislation and see whether or not it fits the needs of our community, and if we want to make modifications, if we want to adopt it, and then
Isn't that something that we do?
it will come to the town board.
So that's the limit of the task force involvement, is looking at the proposed OLA legislation, nothing else.
Yes, because within the legislation, there's the creation of a continuing task force. So this would be just to look at the legislation, and then if we adopt future legislation, there would be a different task force established that would probably incorporate community members as well.
And what will they be tasked with?
That remains to be seen. We'd have to come up with a mission statement for that.
So we're going to adopt a new task force. This one is just looking at the OLA legislation.
Looking at the OLA legislation.
That's it. Okay.
Yep.
And they're advising us on,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, bringing in community members,
I understand.
police, and just kind of,
And because this is proposed legislation, it will be subject to a public hearing.
yeah.
All right.
If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
I,
Aye.
Motion carried.
Whereas Michael Wenzel has applied for a rebate from the town of Shelter Island under Chapter 88 of the Shelter Island Town Code to install a low nitrogen sanitary system for property located at 46 North Menantic Road, Shelter Island, New York. And whereas the Water Quality Improvement Advisory Board, WQIAB, has reviewed the project and recommended a conditional rebate of up to $16,000 be awarded. Now therefore be it resolved that the town board hereby adopts the findings of the WQIAB and approves the applicant for a conditional rebate of up to $16,000 in eligible costs upon completion of the project, and subject to the applicant's compliance with and completion of all terms and conditions of the conditional rebate agreement. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution shall be given to the WQIB and the building department. So moved.
second?
All in favor?
Aye.
I was going to say
I'm sorry.
abstentions.
Yeah.
Motion carried.
Resolved that the supervisor is hereby authorized and directed to issue a refund in the amount of $500 to JBH of Peconic from the 2026 A2089 Commercial Activity Revenue Code for the return of the business on town property application fee. So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Be resolved that the supervisor is hereby authorized and directed to sign the agreement between the town of Shelter Island and East End Pest Control in connection to services for the Taylor's Island cabin. So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Resolved that the supervisor is hereby authorized and directed to execute the contract between the town of Shelter Island and Suffolk County for the AAA Transportation Program for a term of January 1st, 2026 to December 31st, 2026. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Resolved that the supervisor is hereby authorized and directed to execute the contract between the town of Shelter Island and Suffolk County for the nutrition program for a term of January 1, 2026 to December 31, 2026. So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Resolved that the supervisor is hereby authorized and directed to execute the contract between the town of Shelter Island and Suffolk County for the shopping assistance program for the elderly with the term of January 1st, 2026 through December 31st, 2026. So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Be resolved that the supervisor is hereby authorized and directed to execute the contract between the town of Shelter Island and Suffolk County for the youth sports and education summer contract with a term of October 1st, 2025 to September 30th, 2026. So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Resolved that the supervisor is hereby authorized and directed to execute the contract between the town of Shelter Island and Suffolk County for the youth state aid contract with the term of January 1st, 2026 through December 31st, 2026. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Resolved that the supervisor is hereby authorized and directed to execute the letter of engagement between the town of Shelter Island and Craig Fitzsimmons and Meyer LLP for the preparation of the financial statements for the Community Preservation Fund as of and for the year ended December 31, 2025, and for the related financial statement disclosures. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Whereas Ken Lewis, the Superintendent of Highways, Commissioner of Public Works, has deemed the following equipment as surplus and requested permission to dispose of certain equipment by auction, now therefore be resolved that the town board does hereby declare the following equipment to be surplus. 2017 BM 450 Brianmaster, 2028 Stenco 45-foot steel walking floor trailer, 2018 Vorkek, a tuner light sign trailer, 2001 New Holland tractor with Tiger Boom brush mower attachment. Be it therefore resolved that the Supervisor of Highways, Commissioner of Public Works is hereby authorized and directed to dispose of aforementioned equipment by auction. So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Whereas James Reed, Police Chief, has deemed the following vehicle as surplus and requested permission to dispose of certain vehicle by auction. Now therefore be it resolved that the town board does hereby declare the following vehicle to be surplus. 2017 Ford Expedition. Be it further resolved that the police chief is hereby authorized and directed to dispose of the aforementioned vehicle by auction. So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Resolved that the supervisor is hereby authorized and directed to deposit the sum of $174 from Renew Contracting and Restoration, Inc. to the 2026 A 1490.414 Public Works Town Hall and Other Buildings account for the reimbursement of a broken window at the community center. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Resolved that the supervisor is hereby authorized and directed to deposit the sum of $285 from Ronald Jernick to the 2026 A5010.440 Highway Department Training Expense Account for the reimbursement for the SWANA Conference guest fee. So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Resolved that the following 2026 budget transfers are hereby approved. $10 from the B3620.492 Building Department Education and Training to B3622.400 Fire Marshal Education Materials, and $10 from B8010.400 Zoning Department Education and Training to B3622.400 Fire Marshal Education Materials to cover the overage and cost from the NFPA Fire Code books. So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Be resolved that 2026 general claims number 555 through 708 in the amount of $154,377.46. 2026 highway claims numbered 62 through 68 in the amount of $1,469.42. And 2026 community preservation fund claims numbered 3 through 4 in the amount of $10,000 are hereby approved for payment as audited. And the supervisor and/or any town board member is hereby authorized and directed to sign the approval for payment of the same. So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. All right, we will adjourn the town board meeting and go into public hearings, and then open the first public hearing, 16 Clinton Avenue, over Brookfield property bulkhead. Debbie, if you'd read the.
On the 27th day of April 2026 at the Shelter Island Town Hall at 6:00 PM or as soon thereafter prevailing time on the application of Overbrook Real Property LLC, 16 Clinton Avenue, for permission to remove and dispose of 128 feet 6 inches of existing face bulkhead and a 12-foot north return in place for a total of 140 foot 6 inches, and provide a 10-foot wide vegetative non-turf buffer with a 4-foot wide walking path as per plans prepared by Paas Costello Marine Contracting dated 1/16/2026 and approved by the New York State DEC on 2/03/2026.
We have a WMAC report.
Yes. WMAC confirmed that the use of a barge and crane will be unlikely and majority of the materials will be brought in by land. WMAC unanimously approved the application 6-0.
And we have Jack Costello here to present on behalf of the applicant.
It's here to answer any questions. I didn't think I'd be up here this long.
I know, I'm just
Yeah.
like double checking the notes to see if I wrote anything down.
I did not have any questions for
No,
you.
neither did I. I'm just making sure I didn't have any questions.
Pretty straightforward.
It was pretty
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a big project. Yeah, I
In kind and in place.
didn't have anything.
Yeah.
So we'll open it up to the public and see if the
Yeah.
public has any questions or comments. Anyone in the Zoom audience? All right, taking none, we will close that public hearing. And we will reopen the public hearing for the Pike dock. There's nothing to read there, and
So
we,
I did just get an email from someone that wants me to read.
okay, all right, and we had, I think we were waiting on this one for the WMAC report on this one. Because we didn't have it last meeting.
Okay, what you have here?
Yes. I think this came from
All right.
us.
After discussing discrepancies in the plans, the length of the dock compared to the mean low water depth, the design of the dock, and the lack of a primary structure on the property, WMAC members generally agreed that the location is very challenging and not suitable for a dock. Members also discussed and had substantial disagreement over riparian rights and reasonable access to the water, compliance with the code, and safety concerns raised by the community as reflected in the vote. Members agreed to submit split vote reports to explain the yay-nay positions for the town board. WMAC voted 3-3-1. Member Ween was not present and did not vote. Please note additional correspondence has been submitted by WMAC members in regards to the Pike application.
And Shelby, correspondence?
Or this will be my first, I literally just got it, so. Okay. It's from Matt Williamson, in his personal capacity. He says, "Dear members of the town board, I've shared my views on this application in my role as a member of the WMAC, but I would like to add comments in my personal capacity as a member of the Shelter Island community. I would summarize my formal points as follows. This application violates section 5311C3 of the code regarding total linear length. The code in section 5311B relies on a dock being built on a lot with a principal dwelling while this lot is vacant. Accessory structures should not be built on vacant lots. The applicant's riparian rights are satisfied with the riparian mooring they currently have. Just to be clear, the definition of riparian rights reads as follows in the code. Quote, the entitlement of the owner of upland property fronting on a body of water to reasonable access to and use of such water. Note that it doesn't say right to build a dock or anything close. This permanent private structure comes at significant direct cost to the countervailing safe access rights of the public and neighbors. Again, speaking personally, I am very troubled by this application and hope you will reject it. During our last meeting with this dock on the agenda, one of my colleagues on the WMAC made a statement about how we should handle this application and others. He said neighbors need to share. In itself, that's a statement that I agree with. However, his understanding of the word sharing and mine are diametrically opposed and get to the heart of why this dock and others like it is so problematic. To him, sharing means the Pikes neighbors and the community should stay quiet and just let these applicants jam their dock in where it's not wanted. When I recognized that that is what he meant by share, I was gobsmacked. Permanently driving pilings into the public area is not sharing. Once driven in, these pilings never come out. Their neighbors and the public will have to deal with them forever. Putting a permanent structure in public waters that takes up space regardless of whether it is in use is not sharing. Creating a private protected basin that severely limits visibility and usability for others is not sharing. Forcing other waterfront users to detour out and around a hazard is not sharing. The use is exclusionary. Neither simultaneous nor sequential use of this space by others is possible. Other people aren't allowed onto these private docks and are wise to stay clear, especially with the splashboards proposed. Even when the applicant is gone or their yacht safely stored for the season, other people can't make use of that space. It's not even a timeshare. This particular design creates a literal protected private basin in public waters, a use that is so far from the access to the waterways allowed under the riparian rights concept as to be absurd. People can't build covered garages in the middle of town roads. This applicant says, "You let my neighbor Sapin down the beach do this to the community, so you have to let me too." They say this despite the ensuing anger, upset, and initiative to change the code. That's audacious, to put it mildly. With moorings at this location, the case is very different. People can swim or paddle past a moored boat on either side. They can do laps if they want. If circumstances change, the boat gets sold, the location is a problem, etc., a mooring can be pulled. When a moored boat isn't there, the space is available for others. The float and stick remain behind, but are minimal. That is sharing. People in the community lament how it is changing. Just in the last couple of years, people with vast resources swept in and took over several local businesses. Then they got bored and dumped them unceremoniously, leaving our community the poorer for it. Meanwhile, this applicant rolled 5 people deep into our last WMAC meeting, snowing us with yet more bound and index packets in yet another document submission. In addition to the lawyer and contractor there in person, every time I called on a community member from the Zoom, it was actually another one of their retainers. Consultant 1, consultant 2, and property manager. They were probably here again tonight. You know who didn't show or call in? The applicants. We will get rolled like this again and again unless we as a community stand up for ourselves and assert what is best for the community. This application doesn't meet provisions of the code and it is not in the best interest of the public. Please reject it. Sincerely, Matt Williamson.
I see we have John Armentano here for the applicant.
Yes.
Do you have anything you wanted to present or just answer questions?
I do have quite a bit to present, obviously, with that introduction. I think there's something I need to say, and we'll get to this with some length. So, again, John Armentano, Final Fritz, representing the applicant. You've been here several times over the seasons, and I can say honestly, this is the prettiest season you have had so far. Hope I'm not here again, no offense. I did want to hand out some information. I know you're familiar with the project, but I think it'll help kind of reorient the board to this project.
Is this new information?
It's not really technical information, it's more diagrams, things that you've seen before, but we're trying to package it to just bring you, again, to remind you where we've been, to respond to the Waterways Committee.
I'll take it. This one's, thank you. Sorry about that.
So, again, as you're familiar, we have modified this dock several times. The owner of the property is at 6 Bluff Avenue in connection with the residential dock permit. It was originally at 110-foot main pier with a 5x27 L section. That was the seaward terminus with the dolphin pile located to the east. For reference, we have Exhibit 1 gives you an orientation of where the proposed dock is. This is to scale. It does show, again, the Sapin dock, the Heights dock. The distances are calculated from the groin at 354. It is a significant distance from the existing dock to the, called the northeast. That is the Beach Club dock. That's approximately 600 feet. Again, just for your orientation, as I'm sure you're aware, Exhibit 2, as you've seen, shows the distances and the fetch that the stock has to withstand in this proposed location. And we can address, some of my experts tonight can address the technical aspects of that. And just for a reference point, Exhibit 3 was the original dock that was proposed, which is 100 feet, extends 100 feet from mean high water. This is actually thought by the water committee to be a better dock. The length of dock, they said, and I have their reports, it's in a second handout of yours, but there was it's a 3-3 split. You had 3 in favor, 3 opposed. The 3 in favor, and I believe it's on the record, there were members of the public that indicated a support for the dock in its original configuration, in that it would extend further out. Jack Costello can speak to the technical aspects of that, but it seems to be the concept was getting the boat to berth further off the shoreline was a safety concern that was satisfied, or at least better served with the 100-foot dock. And then you have Exhibit 4, which is the revised dock, which is at 88.5 feet from the mean high water, with a 27-foot float and a mooring pile to the south. And that is code compliant to the extent that it meets where the dock must stop when it reaches 4 feet of depth. And we reach 4 feet of depth at 88.5 feet. And according to your code, that's where the dock shall end. And that is what has been proposed. That is what has been resubmitted to this board for its consideration. It was also before the Waterways Committee. But if you consider the argument that was raised, and was raised also at the Waterways Committee, there is another code section that speaks to the linear configuration, which is somewhat of a unique code section. Can't say I've run across that in my travels, but it's an interesting provision which seems to suggest it's almost like the circumference, or you're measuring down to the mooring pile. That's where there seems to be an exceedance of the code, but we can discuss that in a little more depth in a few minutes. In addition, and I believe you've seen this before, Exhibit 5 is a letter dated January 9th, 2026, from Costello Marine Contracting. Their representative, Jack, is here tonight, and it discusses the reasons why there should be a waiver or a variance of the length of dock because of the need to get to a 100 feet is a safer configuration. I know safety has been a main concern that has been raised by the community at several of these hearings, but it does go past the 4-foot depth of water. But the rationale, as Jack will discuss with you, is that it is a safer configuration. So you basically are faced with the choice of 2 docks. We're proposing either. One's in the alternative, one is code compliant with the exception of the linear calculation, and we'll discuss that also during this meeting. And then for Exhibit 6, we presented to you the Sapin dock and how that was configured. Its length is also 100 feet from mean high water, actually 100 feet from high water. It extends out into the appropriate location and has the splashboards that we're also seeking tonight. By way of example, and I think it's illustrative, Exhibit 7, there were statements made that the splashboard would somehow be impeding the literal transport of sediment. The splashboards, as these are depicted, showing the Sapin dock in 2025, and then, well, in 2022, where you can see the shoreline, and then in 2025, you can see that shoreline remains relatively unscathed and does not have the concern of the scouring, which would be the stopping of the transport of sediment from the literal drift. And again, the configuration of the Sapin dock gives you an understanding at least what would the Pike dock look like. This is the type of configuration that is proposed, not identical, but illustrative. Again, as we're aware, we have DEC approvals, Army Corps. They have a depth to water requirement that we're also meeting with either dock. So I want to just place it to the board. We're here for an approval, we hope, of one or the other. You've been given alternatives. The issue of code compliance, I think, comes into play from legal perspectives. And again, for the record, and as council has indicated, we are subject to the, I'll call it the old doc, which is relatively the same, but there were certain changes that were made in the new doc. But we are bound to the old doc. So the citations that were made by the gentleman there are incorrect. I think the correct citation to the linear description is 5311C sub 3, and that discusses the total linear measurement that was that issue and seemed to be a concern of me as an individual and as a board member. And one of the other issues that came up last time we were here, and I submitted this previously to the board, but I have copies for you, was the question. These are hard copies. I know we give you we bring a lot of paperweight, so when we hold the door open, we have plenty of paperweights. This was previously submitted to the board, and I hope you had a chance to review it. I think it goes to one of the other questions that was raised and has been raised by the Shelter Heights community, and I believe it became an issue for one of the board members as well. And this turns on the issue of an accessory structure on a vacant lot. And I know there's also been correspondence submitted by Mr. Jeff Bragman on behalf of the Shelter Island Heights community. But just to take you through this, I know your council will make a determination, because this is more of a legal determination than a board determination. But I think part of what should be considered is the reality of the code and the reality of what has been done in the past. So again, this issue was raised, this is Exhibit 1, it was raised on March 16th of 2026 by the Shelter Island Heights Property Owners Corporation. They raised two basic points. One is safety, the other is, can an accessory structure, I guess the question is a dock an accessory structure? And then from that question, can it be located on a vacant dock? That's the genesis of the question. There are issues in your code that make reference to what is an accessory structure. But just to be clear for the record, because I believe this came up at a prior meeting, I believe it was discussed. Waterways Committee, Exhibit 2 is the deed into the Pike Trust. And I think it bears weight that these were not sold separately. This was a transfer from the Pikes into their property owners, and they were subsequently purchased from a prior owner into the Pike Trust. And if you, I don't want to bore you with the details of the deed, but the deed transfers both parcels, parcel A, which is lot 9, and you also have, which is considered, that's the landward property, and then you have parcel B, which is lot 1, and that is the separate lot. The road, the property is separated by Bluff Road, but it is held in the same ownership. So the property appears to always been transferred because they are complementary to each other. As I'm sure you're aware, I mean, you are on the island, there are several properties that are that have these unique situations. And I would say because of the number, it's not that unique. We're not a one special case. There are several, and I believe there is a letter, it's Exhibit 3. It is from the Shelter, it's dated April 9th, and it is from your principal building inspector, Reed Karen. And he states very succinctly in the paragraphs that are before you that and in his letter, second paragraph, he says, docks have never, the primary structure argument has never applied to docks, meaning that you do not need to have a primary structure on a property to avail yourself of the accessory structure concept, meaning accessory structures have to have a primary. That is never applied, and he used the word never, and I take him at his word. It appears he's done extensive research in this matter. and there are approximately 55 docks with no residents. That's not insignificant. He also goes on to state in summary that the town board has approved 25 docks on undeveloped lots since 1998, which was the year that the original dock code was created. And so I think that speaks volumes as to the argument. I think it defeats the argument that you cannot construct a dock on a vacant lot. This vacant lot is subservient to the main lot. It is just disconnected by the road. There's a staircase that provides access only for the home to the dock. So, from your expert, which is the building inspector, he does not consider this to be an anomaly that cannot be approved by this board. In fact, there have been several docks on vacant lands that are known to have been approved by the board. I've provided with you 6 of them. There are more. I'm sure Jack can speak to them off the top of his head, but you have several approvals. You have a 2001 approval of the Malmus or D. Dalmas. And again, reading through, I think the operative, there's an approval by Shelter Island for this use. Is a dock of 100 feet. The diagrams in the DEC application clearly show that this is on Windbrook, and it shows you that this dock is constructed on a vacant lot. So it has been approved for the very purpose that we are seeking the same approval. In 2003, with an approval by a Celio, similar circumstances in that he's on Shore Road. Again, this was brought by and approved by this board, and it was also constructed and applied for by Costello Marine. And again, it shows you as you parse through the DEC approval, and again, there's an accompanying Shelter Island approval. Again, Shore Road, there's a separation from the structure by a road. That's a public road. Again, that was approved by this board in 2003. If we turn to Exhibit 6, the approval of Sarah Ward in November of 2011. Again, I don't mean to be repetitive, but we are making a record here for obvious reasons. Again, similar situation. Town of Shelter Island approval is contained with this approval, and it again has a separation of dock from structure by a road. There is Exhibit 7, which was approved by this board and the DEC in 2018. Again, same circumstances we find ourselves in today, where you have a separation of primary residence and vacant land by a road, which is a feature of Shelter Island and in other places as well. I've handled situations like this in many other jurisdictions, but again, this is a approval for a dock and pier on a vacant lot. And finally, Exhibit 8 is again an approval that was granted for Oscar Slotterbeck. Again, this was in 2022. The same situations are present. You have the separation of dock and primary residence. I think that speaks to the point that was raised. I know you're the village attorney, the town attorney, sorry, will have his own opinion on this. But in our interpretation, and from a legal perspective, and from a zoning perspective, the concept of having a dock on a vacant lot that is linked to a primary residence, but for the separation of a road, does not rise to the level of not being permitted under your zoning code. Your zoning code does have a definition of accessory structures. Docks are listed in there, but there's also your dock code, which is the code that's applicable to our application. Your dock code does not speak to the requirement that there be a primary structure. It is actually silent on that. And again, the process that's been the town's historical and precedent setting has been allowing for docks on vacant land. They will not allow for sheds or other structures such as pool, which are more indicative of a use, like a primary or an accessory use. Again, an accessory use is defined in your code as a dock, but it is in your zoning code. And this goes to more of a legal argument, and again, I don't want to bore you with the concept, although it is important for you and for the record to understand that when you have two code sections that are written, they should be read in harmony with each other. When you harmonize these two sections, the obvious default is the concept of a dock is not foreign to vacant land if it is connected or separate, I guess I should say it differently. If it is separated merely by a road held in the same ownership, that is not breaching your zoning code, nor is that question before you. I understand the question has been raised several times. We wanted to answer that question. I know there was another submission that was made by Mr. Jeff Bragman, who spoke to that point, as others. And again, he focuses, as an attorney would, on the alternative arguments. But I believe that your code, your building inspector, and your practices clearly set forth the precedent that you are bound by. And that I think make good sense, good planning sense, because the concept that you're being asked is this dock being placed in the right location? Does it meet the code, meaning the dock code, not the zoning code? Your building inspector has taken the position that it does not apply to docks. So I think we kind of closed the loop. I don't want to go into great detail with Mr. Bragman's letter. He makes arguments to the contrary, but again, the fact that this is, again, there's a concept of zoning and village law that if there is even any ambiguity, the ambiguity should be construed in favor of the property owner. So even if there could be the argument there's an ambiguity, which I say there isn't, there is no ambiguity because your code does not make a distinction to require that docks be on properties with primary structures. Now, I'm sure I will be told that that is an incorrect summary, but I think the case law bears that out. And again, the arguments as to riparian rights that were raised, there was a case that was referenced by Mr. Bragman about, it's a Village of Asheroken case. I believe you've discussed this. I've been here several times on this matter. That Asheroken case is very distinctly different from this application, this riparian rights. The Village of Asheroken case dealt with, and I tracked this case very closely. There was land that was owned by the Village of Asheroken, and the code itself said there shall not be docks in this specific location. It was a granted underwater land from a wealthy benefactor, and they didn't want docks there. That's not the case here, so that case is clearly distinguishable. And again, the concept that the linear measurement, I believe Jack Stella will speak to, this can be remedied to be completely code compliant by removing the dolphin pile. So then that measurement falls away, because the argument is that when I'll do a little math quickly, if we have an 88.5 length of dock and you're allowed a linear circumference, for lack of a better word, or a linear distance, 1.5 that time, it's 132.6 feet. So if you take that dimension, you can clearly make the dock at the 88.5, and you can bring out the length of the float, so we're clearly within that dimension. But when you come down to the measurement of the dolphin, that's when you exceed the code. So we're here tonight to present a final revision, and Jack will speak to that, to make this code compliant with the removal of the dolphin pile, which then makes us code compliant for that section. But the question really here before the board, and this is for you to make the determination, is which dock would you prefer? There's the 100-foot dock, for lack of a better word, and there's the 88.5. The 88.5 with the removal of the dolphin pile can become completely code compliant, which I think is the objective of this board. The board is inclined to grant the extension of the dock into the 100-foot length. That is also your prerogative. I believe the Waterways Committee recommended that by 3. And also for the record, the one individual of the 3 no's indicated, and I did include that in the as Exhibit 9, we have both of their reports, their favorable report and they call it the no report, which would be the negative report. There is a discussion about the linear measurements, and Jack can speak to this. He was at the meeting one of the individuals that I'm unclear as to what his name was, indicated that he was okay with it, but for the issue of the accessory structure question. So if the accessory structure question falls away, you would be left with a 3-2 if you give me that. If his only reason for no was the accessory question or the accessory structure question, then that vote becomes a nullity. Leaving a 3-2, again, it's advisory to this board. You'll make the final determination. I think we've been here and you have quite a bit of information. I'm not giving you a lot of new information. I believe the only real new information was the analysis of the accessory structure. I'm obviously here to answer any questions that you may have. I also have Jack would like to call up to speak to the dock in its construction phase and what can be done and how it complies with the code. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, you come on up.
All right, back here again. So just John and Kelly did a very thorough job of doing the presentation for you guys. So basically the shorter dock with the removal of the mooring pile meets the linear footage equation, which the board really has to take a look at that chapter in the code because it's really foolish. Doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense. But anyway, so the shorter dock would completely meet code completely if that one pile were removed from the equation. So there is a permissible dock within your code right here in front of you if we take that pile out. The pile makes it a little bit easier to tie off the boat. So in that particular case of the shorter dock, we'd be looking for leniency just to have that one pile to tie off the stern of the boat. In this particular situation, if we have the ability to put a dock there, why not make it a little bit longer, as we've done with almost every dock on outside waters, out to at least that 100-foot measurement. It would make more sense to increase the size of that berthing area just to make it a better spot for the boat. This, if we take that one mooring pile, on the northeast side and move it 4 feet seaward, it now becomes compliant to the linear footage equation. The only thing with the longer dock we'd be looking for a little bit of leniency from is that 4-point contour, which basically we're making the dock like 12 feet longer. So we're only looking for leniency to that 4-foot contour because the dock is supposed to end at a 4-foot or 100 foot. And generally speaking, we've gone to 125, 132, 128, even in, as you're going into West Neck Harbor, even up to 150 feet long. So basically, in this particular case, we can put a compliant dock on this property. But what I am saying is I think it'd be better to put a better dock with a little bit longer of a berthing area. And that's the way three gentlemen on the Waterways Committee felt, that it would be better to have a little bit of a larger berthing area, making the dock 12 feet longer. So it's either we're going to come here and say, we're going to do a completely compliant dock, remove the pile, and if that's what this board wants, or you go with a logical thing, make the dock a little bit longer, make the berthing area a little bit longer, and have a dock that's just better. So if we're going to allow a dock, why don't we allow a dock that makes a little bit more sense to increase the size of the berthing area? So, I'm here to answer any questions, but out of respect for John and Kelly and all the research they've done, and this big thing with this linear footage equation, which I really think you got to take a look at, we can come here before you with a completely compliant dock.
I have a question regarding the safety of not having the pylons to tie up. I feel like that would be a challenge when it comes to securing the boat to not have the pylons.
It would certainly be better. As far as the safety issue goes, we could figure it out. It would just diminish the size of the boat. It would be nice to keep that pile. Like I said, you put a pulley on it with a rope and you can kind of hold the boat off, but it's not a deal breaker. It would certainly make the situation better. And like I said, as far as making the dock 12 feet longer, 12 feet longer is the length of we're arguing about the length of your table. That's probably 12 feet. In real terms, we're not out in the open bay, we're in a little room. So certainly the piling helps, certainly the size of your desk helps. Gives us 12 feet more for a better berthing area. But like I said, you have the ability to come in front of you with a completely compliant dock to the linear footage equation and the water depth equation. So, but like I said, certainly having that pile there will make it easier for the boat to stay there. But like I said, it's not a deal breaker on our end. But like I said, I'm a guy building the dock. I would go for the 100-foot dock with the tie-off pile. We could slide that forward 4 feet. We can become compliant with the linear footage equation. We're just seeking leniency to the 4-foot contour.
Thank you, Jack.
I'll be sitting over there if I have more questions.
Thank you.
I don't know if you had any questions for Kelly. She has environmental expertise. If there were any questions, I know you've had her here several times. If there's something that you need to ask her, she's here. I don't know if she needs to go through her presentation again, just for brevity. I think the shorter dock, we've spoken about that. And I think she attested to the issues associated with the sediment transportation in terms of the ecology of the area. And her opinion is that there is no negative impacts, and nor have we heard from any other experts in the field. She is obviously an expert in this field. We have heard conjecture from residents, but I believe you have the expert opinions, which have been that this will not cause an adverse impact on the environment, nor the literal transportation of sediment. So I just wanted to add that. If you have questions, she's obviously here to answer those questions.
Any questions from the board?
I don't have any
I don't have any.
unanswered questions.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Then I will open it up to the public. I'll start with the in-person audience. Come on up. Speaking of the record.
My name is Rebecca Northey. I'm a Shelter Island Heights resident. Council. I'm just going to read a letter to submit. I'm tired. I'm not going to do it without reading.
That's you.
So, but even before I get to this, let me just say, it seems that there is no proposal for a safe and compliant dock here. Everybody disagrees about what would be the best dock, the compliant dock. What is a safe and compliant dock? We haven't heard there is one. But anyway, I write to counter briefly 2 arguments made in support of the bike application. This is basically from Sarah Fritz's recent letter.
Comments should be directed to us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Applicant's counsel states Chapter 53 of the prior dock code contains no provisions or criteria that relate to public safety, which has been repeatedly raised by opponents with no supporting information or evidence. That's hidden in footnote 2, or I mean on footnote 1 on page 2 of counsel's April 23 submission. Hidden presumably because applicant hoped opponents wouldn't notice and point out its obvious flaws. Protecting public safety is the primary duty of government and the justification for most regulations, including the dock regulations here. That does not have to be repeated in every regulation. And in fact, Code 5313A, I think this is of the prior dock code, refers explicitly to public safety, stating that, quote, "It shall be the owner's responsibility to maintain the dock in the interests of public safety." It also states 5313C, authorizing the town to repair or seek an order to remove a dock at the owner's expense if it is, quote, "a threat to life or property or a menace to navigation." It's absurd to suggest that the town should consider public safety only after a dock is constructed, but not when deciding whether a dock should be constructed in the first place. If a dock would be unsafe as located, designed, or built, it would be impossible to maintain in the interests of public safety. The suggestion that there is, quote, "no supporting information or evidence of risk to public safety" is equally unfounded. The Shelter Island Heights Property Owners Corporation has established that the proposed dock would be less than 100 feet from a historic swimming beach. The members of the WMAC agree that this is, quote, "a challenging location for a dock," and the WMAC chairman's memo on behalf of the members voting against details hazards that the dock would create for boaters and swimmers. Furthermore, you are entitled to rely on your personal experience as long as you disclose that you're doing so. Some of you are boaters, no doubt aware of the strong currents and back eddies along that shoreline, and at least one of you swam in those waters as a child, others perhaps more recently. Clearly, there's evidence of significant risks to public safety. I also want to address the argument that applicant relies on, that the fact that the town board recently granted the Sapiens application to construct a dock on this previously pristine shoreline requires the board to grant their application. But there is a very obvious difference between this application and the Sapiens that you must take into account. The effects of a single dock are not equivalent to the effects of two docks. A second dock on this stretch of beach with more and possibly larger boats docking even closer to a well-used beach would double the impediments to public access, as well as the public safety risks to boaters and swimmers. A second dock would also motivate dock applications by other owners along the bluff. If allowing one dock requires the board to allow a second dock, what about a third dock and a fourth? The public owns the waterfront, not the landowner, and not the applicant here. The applicant is entitled to no more than reasonable access, and in deciding whether this dock proposal is reasonable, you must weigh the applicant's interest in having this dock against the public interest in preserving safe access to the water. Plainly, each additional dock compounds the problems. The balance shifts. You should draw the line now, recognizing that the negative impacts of a second dock far outweigh this applicant's interest in expanding his already reasonable access to the water beyond his existing moorings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Stellene Gudis, and I'm representing the Board of Directors of the Shelter Island Heights Property Owners Board. And I know we're all tired, at least I can say I am. This morning, as was pointed out, our attorney sent a letter to you all. Number one, I have copies, but do you all have copies?
Yes.
Okay. And does anybody want me to read this into the record?
We have it as part of the record
Okay,
already,
yeah.
so everyone's
Yeah.
fine?
so we don't have to read. And it was provided to the applicant, so they have.
Perfect. So then I have very quick comments. Two comments, actually. One, I really respect Reed, Karen, for everything he does, but the first paragraph of his letter was very clear that the building department has nothing to do with the application and approval process for a dock. And in his second paragraph, where he did describe other dock situations, first sentence says, it's his understanding that. So someone who's not in the position to go through the application process, I just question that. The other comment that I have is that I think it's very important that the deeds, yes, should be considered. The deeds for 1 and 6, the one deed for 1 and 6 Bluff, they are in the same deed, separate tax maps. There are no covenants, no restrictions, and no easements that are there that tether those two pieces together. So they can be sold separately, even though they've traveled in the same deed. And we should, before we make any opinions or this board makes any decisions, perhaps you can also check the other deeds of some of these lots, these small lots that have been approved, because those can be either there could be underwater rights that have been assigned, they could be tethered, there could be easements. So I would say go through that list pretty thoroughly. We have tried to, but we have not done any deed reviews. The last comment that I'd like to make on behalf of the board is the dock code is not silent on the concept of a primary structure. And if you look at section 5311B, it says the location of a dock shall cross water frontage of a lot with the same setback requirements from the extremes of that water frontage as applied to the principal dwelling on that lot. And words matter. So this code, the dock code, is in harmony with the zoning code. And I just want to leave you with that. We would encourage, as I'm sure the applicant would, close the hearing. Hopefully you have enough information to do what you need to do, get advice from Thomas, and thank you for letting us speak.
Thank you, Stella.
Thank you, Stella.
Anyone else in the physical audience? Don't know the woman's name. I can't remember it from last time, sorry.
Hi, my name is Lorraine Walker, and I live in the Heights on Bluff Avenue above the Beach Club. As you have been talked about, it's approximately 100 feet from the easterly property line of the proposed dock to the westerly property line of the community beach swim and recreation area. That's a recipe for disaster. Adding the powerful current, you've all heard, strong prevailing wind, and close mooring at 3 Bevan Place. We think this is really untenable for the safety of everybody that's looking at navigation and swimming and enjoyment. Last year, and this is really why I wanted to get up, a petition was created and signed by 138 people in the community and on the island, asking the board not to approve this dock, based on the fact that it's a historic swim area, it's a community area, and then more importantly, it's the safety of the people who enjoy that. Swimmers, paddleboarders, kayakers. And I have a list, if anybody wanted to see it, of all the people that took it upon themselves to sign a petition to the board. The other thing that's important, and again, I think you might have seen photos, but I just want to remind everybody, because we go by that whole thing of a picture's worth 1,000 words. And this is what this looks like as an area that they're asking, if I ask you to pass back for 6 cents. As an area that is being considered as a dock. Those are people at the swim club, beach club, community area, trying to enjoy their time there. And you can see currently the situation with just moorings out there. Those boats are very, very close to the swimmers, the kids swimming area, the adult swimming area, and everybody else that enjoys it. If you add a dock, it's going to make it even more difficult to navigate. There'll be more boats that are out there, longer situations out there. There's also a mooring at the Bevan next door, which complicates it because it sits between the beach club and the proposed dock. So we ask you to really take this into consideration, and we really ask you to not approve this dock. We think it's a horrible location. The Waterway Management Advisory Council both times they approved applications, whether it was 100 feet or 85 feet, they all said it's a dangerous place for a dock. And so we ask you to keep that in mind. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you.
Tim, you had your hand up next. Come on up. Don't mind me. I'm just plugging in my computer, which I forgot to do at the beginning. So you can get started.
My name is Tim Pertel, and I live at 5 Bluff Avenue. And Sharon Edwards and I co-own property at 8 Bluff Avenue. So we have actually the adjacent property next door to the Pike property, the beach. Actually, I have a couple of questions, actually, while you're here, I know I have to address here, but I'm a little confused about the length of the boat that's being considered for the dock. At one point, there was discussion of this 36-foot boat, and I was told it's not 36. But then at the WMAC meeting the other night, that length came up again. So I'm just curious, how large a boat are we talking about? You asked the board, well, I asked you that, but I was supposed to address it. but-
Yes. I'm not sure if it's in here because it's. If I got that right, we don't need the boat
So
length.
do we have an idea?
It wasn't a hard number.
I can answer what if the question is asked to me.
Yeah.
What's the length of the boat?
Yes.
This is how we're gonna work it.
Yeah, it's telephone, yeah.
I think I can speak to the question, again, as to riparian rights, the dock dictates the size of the boat. We are limited by the dock as to the size of the boat. You can't park a larger boat there. I don't know what you would answer that. but
Plus the depth, because you're gonna allow a large boat, so it's not really relevant to whether there's a dock or not. My name is Brian Moorhead, and
No, we want to make sure we're,
Yeah.
do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very quickly, then I want to cover the rest, yeah.
so if you're trying to dictate how big a boat we can actually have, then I would think that would apply to all docks. You know, what size boat are you gonna put in? You'd ask that question to everyone that's gonna be building a dock.
Right, the answer to the question is, it's not relevant, the question is not relevant for the dock, right? The dock will dictate the size of the boat. We will have to conform the boat to whatever dock is approved. That's the real answer. The question's been asked, I don't know if you have an answer to the actual question.
Well, the actual question is, you know, it depends upon, you know, what dock is actually approved. So I can't give you the length of a dock, but how, you know, what boat size boats does my boss, the owner of that property, own? You know, everything from 75, which is down in the Keys, to what we normally use here, which is 27 and a 21-foot Zodiac. And we have had the 36 inflatable also on the mooring. But, you know, if it draws more than the dock's going to allow, then of course it's not going to be on the dock.
Right.
It will be there for pickups, you know, and that's at the end.
That answered the question.
Thank you.
I guess my question is, and this is something we think about a while ago,
Yes.
so this is a diagram that was handed out to everybody, which I think you're all familiar with. And my question is that you've got a mooring in a neighboring property here, you've got the dock here, and this is that shows the direction that the neighboring boat can go depending on the tides. So if you have a 36 boat going in here, although you're saying it might go at the end of the dock, I'm just questioning and concerned about how much leeway you have to actually the flexibility of moving a dock here depending on what direction this neighboring moored boat is actually, where that is at the moment. So I'm concerned about maneuverability. And I have to say that when we were at the WMAC, meaning I'm not jumping on them, I'm also on committees, but they seem to be unaware of the position of the moorings in that area. So I just want to bring that up. Also, I'm not really sure that, and I've been a boater my entire life, mostly sailing, that a dock actually allows you more maneuverability, particularly with an L at the end, more flexibility than a mooring does, depending again on the wind, the tides, and the current in that area, which are very variable. You can go out at noon and it's all flat. You can come back at 4 p.m. and you've got a strong tide, you've got a strong wind, you've got strong wave action. So you're really stuck going in one particular position to get to that dock versus a mooring, which allows you more leeway. Another question is, that's never been clear to me, is how many moorings, if they do have a dock, will they keep a mooring or not have any moorings? So that's a question I have for them. And there was talk at one point of keeping one mooring in case of a storm. So again, I don't know if you want to ask the question.
One of the board members. I mean, I can ask the question. Yeah, I'm just looking because I'm like existing site moorings.
And part of the reason why I asked,
Yeah, because that's the
Mhm.
neighbor.
That's the
And
neighbor
then
one,
these
yeah.
are theirs.
Yeah.
So I mean, that one no longer works and this one would take the dock, so.
Yeah, okay, so we'll ask that question. Do you have any other questions? So we,
well, it's connected to that question. So if they decide to keep a mooring,
I would presume that that mooring is going to be between the dock and our property because it allows more, again, more flexibility to get to the dock. So currently, one of the moorings already floats into sort of our view. I don't know how you determine property that's actually public waters, but so if they keep a mooring here, I'm very interested in where that mooring is going to go, and because it does affect our view from our beach. And I'm just going to cite again, this comes up many, many times in comments I've made and other comments, but it's at the WMAC, the unsuitability of this location. It's just, I find it very problematic that even those who vote for this dock will cite the unsuitability of the location. I find that really problematic. And I know that to offset these unsuitability of the location, that they ask for splashboards and other means to make the dock more secure. But that in my mind just means it's an unsuitable location and you have to do all this reinforcement. So I just think, again, I know they're an advisory committee, but I just think in general, for a committee to vote for something and then say it's unsuitable is, I don't understand that. And it's the second time that this has come up with a dock in that location. My property rights, there's a lot of talk about riparian rights and the right for people to have docks. My niece and I have been paying taxes for almost 25 years on that piece of property. So I just feel there's no sort of support or comment on the property rights of those who actually don't want a dock and have no intention to build a dock on their property, and yet they will be affected by the docks, by their surrounding neighbors, particularly if, as Becky pointed out and I pointed out previously, that if you have this dock, there will be 2 docks, and there's the potential of having 2 more docks. So you will have 4 docks total on that stretch of beach, which means if you have paddleboards, sailboats, kayaks, swimming, it just makes it more problematic for us to enjoy those activities with boating activities. And yes, current owners may have taken safety courses, et cetera, to drive their boats carefully, but we have no control over the future. Those people come in jet skis or other kinds of motorboats, and they're not as careful. So I just think there's a real potential safety hazard down the road with having, if you do a full build out of docks in that area. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. So, John, I have a question for you.
Sure. There are a couple.
Yeah. If you are issued permission to build a dock, would you try to keep the 2 moorings? Would you get rid of a mooring? Would you get rid of both moorings?
I was just speaking to Brian, and he indicated that, and this, I believe it's the board's discretion, but if the longer dock at 100 feet was allowed to be constructed, they would remove, and that's one of the moorings, they will remove. I can show this. This is the mooring here. So that would be just sort of, right. So yes, we would be willing to enter into that condition.
Right. So that would be 1 mooring.
Yes.
And you keep them. Do we have others in the audience who wish to speak? Bert?
Yeah. Yeah, hi, Bert Waite, 9 North Terry Road. So I always remember what Helen Rosenblum said about docks, and she said that they're not a right, they're a privilege, you know? And but, you know, the owner, and I feel really strongly about riparian rights, that somebody who owns different property has a right to access the water. And so how do you balance this out here? And I don't buy the argument that separated by the road, you know, means that you can't build a dock, because I see it all over the island. You got it in Cockles Harbor, you got it in Deering Harbor. But you got, the town needs to know a little more about, town board, about some of the things in the code and how it's developed and what is going on here. And I just took the ferry coming over from Greenport, and I was looking right at the spot. And number one, the beach club, even though it's like a private club, you gotta be a member. There is some kind of community use there. And so I think that has to weigh in your decision. Just like if Sunset Beach wants to put a dock in, you're gonna have to answer the same question, because they have rights right in the middle of Crescent Beach. And the houses above, and I'll talk about Stuart Parr's house, had rights right in front of Crescent Beach. And the town gave him a dock like 800 feet down the beach over by, on the other side of Pearland. And they put in a dock there. So the town, I believe, has a right to say no specifically to a dock because of a community need. And it's a hard part. Now, I'm in the mooring I'm in the mooring business. I'm on the water. I'm a captain of boats. I got my 100-ton license. And yes, the code and the guy and Al Loretto said we gotta pass this because the guy's gonna sue us, and the guy's got a lot of money and he can sue this town and you're gonna pay hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend this. And because the guy wants it. But you gotta, if you're gonna say no, and you've gotta be clear about the reasons and giving the guy an alternative. And you also have the idea in the dock code is all about length. And you might have to give them the length, but you don't have to give the L, and you don't have to give the splashboards. And that wasn't made clear to you, I think, in the report from the WMAC. And the other points is that when you're running a boat, riparian right might mean access to the water, but it doesn't mean access to your 200-foot yacht. It means access to the water, maybe your dinghy to your yacht. So when you're running, and a gentleman talked about the size of a boat coming in, when you're in around a swim area, when you're looking over the bow of a boat, depending on the size of it, you have a blind spot. You can't see. I don't care how fast or slow you're going. There's something that you can't see in front of you, unless you're in a dinghy. If you're in a dinghy, the smaller the boat, the safer it's going to be, right? Because you're down low and you're going to see everything that's going around you. So I don't want to see anybody get hurt, and I don't want to see this guy not have his riparian rights. But you got to make a decision based on, and give the guy an alternative if you say no. Okay?
Thank you, Mark. Thank you. Anyone in the physical audience that hasn't had a chance to speak yet? Yes. Okay, come on up. State your name for the record.
Houston Lewis, 22 Wesley Avenue. The other day, I was walking on the beach, and I often walk the beach. And I was thinking of the pier that the Pikes want to make. So I stood in front of on the beach, in front of that area that they're going to be building the pier. And they say that it's going, when they build the pier, it's going to have some steps going up, and there's going to be plenty of room for people who want to walk along the beach without going anywhere near that pier. Well, they should go and do some measuring, because at high tide, there's only about a foot and a half of beach before I, for example, would be trespassing on their land. It's very narrow at high tide. There is absolutely no room. If they want to get onto that pier with dry feet, there's going to be no room for anybody to go along the beach without trespassing. And I have a picture here, if anybody wants to have a look at it.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, here, no question. And can you leave that with Shelby? Kirsten,
Sorry?
can you leave that with Shelby? Do you mind leaving that picture with
Oh,
Shelby?
absolutely. Yeah, you can keep it.
Anyone else in the physical audience who wishes to speak? I think there may be some people on Zoom. Okay, anyone on Zoom? If you don't know how to raise your hand, if you just want to turn your video back on so that I know that you'd like to speak. Okay. Looks like we've gotten to the end of public comments. Goodness. Thank you.
So I just want a chance to respond to some of the comments that were made. I would like Jack to respond as well. Like one comment, I know we're hearing a lot from the board of directors from the Shelter Island Heights. My client is also a member of the Shelter Island Heights, so it's a little untoward that they are continuing to object to one of their shareholders. So we'll be taking that up separately, but I wanted to make sure the board and to Stella that they're aware that they are treading in waters they should not tread, and affecting our property rights is a place they should not go. That being said, it was for the record. I wanted to make another point that there has been some comments about CNRs with the deeds. We are perfectly willing to enter into a covenant that would bind the properties together. There's no question. I don't think one can live without the other. I don't think it's a buildable lot. That waterfront lot, it's cliff, so there is no issue that we would take. And if that is a suggestion, is that a recommendation or a condition of approval, we're perfectly happy to enter into that. I see no issue with that, and I think it will solve a problem and maybe something going forward when these situations, which I'm sure will come up again. So we have no issue with respect to the covenants. Again, as the board is aware, and I'm sure the town attorney is, just the number of community opponents does not in any way should be taken into account by the board. The board is to weigh the facts of the case. The board is to weigh the experts. The board is to consider the public comment. I know public safety has been raised as a thing. It can be easily said, just like there is traffic. There is traffic, and there is concern for public safety. There would be no reason that my client would construct a dock to have a boat to then strike a swimmer or another boat. I don't think but that's something that there's no rationale that's been provided to say, if this dock is built, there will be public safety concerns. I mean, the board is very well aware of the location. You can look at how close the beach club is, very close to the North Ferry. The North Ferry has a lot of boat activity. The ferry constantly passes by. If the concern is, and I don't think a swimmer would swim in those waters, but I've been hearing many comments that sailboats and kayaks and all other types of watercraft will be impacted by a fixed structure. They will be as easily impacted by a moving ferry if they decide to go into that section of the water. We are a less of a public concern, and I find it remarkable that the comments are being lodged that our single dock with a boat is more of a public safety hazard than an active ferry system. I mean, it doesn't stand to reason that amount of activity in that close proximity, if they were not so close, I don't think that argument would work. They are adjoining that location. So I think the argument of public safety, again, has not been proven. I don't think it stands up, and there have been no experts to attest, except I will have Jack speak to that issue in a few minutes. The comments were also raised about the setbacks. Your code speaks to the setbacks, and the reason for the setbacks is to keep it, as we're all aware or come to learn, riparian rights generally run perpendicular from the shoreline. The concept, and it is a good one, and is used in many municipalities, is you cannot put your dock at the edge because then you could possibly impact your neighbor. The reason for the setback is to bring it in so that you're within your property or your riparian zone, so you will not be adversely affecting your neighbors. So the setbacks we are meeting clearly. There have been comments about property rights of neighbors being adversely impacted by a dock. That has to be proven. You can claim I will lose property rights. I don't think, nor has it been proven, that someone's property rights will be devalued by a dock. If anything, it may improve the value, but it in no way diminishes the value, which is the only argument that can be made and has not been proven. There has been no proof by an appraiser or anyone else to say that there will be a loss of value to a neighboring property. It just doesn't stand up, nor has it been proven. The concepts of homes next to each other with docks is what a riparian right owner has a right to. They have a right to their zone. They don't have a right to their neighbor's zone. No one can extend a dock that crosses their riparian zone or in any way interferes with their riparian rights. Riparian rights are the right to construct a dock to facilitate access. And again, you've been here many times, I know we've been here many times, and the ownership has children, an elderly family member. The concept here is to get from the shoreline to a boat, which will be of a smaller size, to then enjoy the waterways, or get to the larger boat. The concept of having a dock is something that my client would like to have because he has a right to have it and he meets your code sections. And I think that's the fine point that we all should understand, is that you have crafted this code. We are subject to the old code, but they're almost interchangeable. So you have decided that docks, if they meet these requirements, and we are proposing a completely compliant dock with the removal of the dolphin, that we have met the requirements of this town code. The concept of safety that were raised, and I didn't put it in a footnote to hide it. I put it in a footnote because it wasn't the purpose of that letter. We've talked about safety many times, so I wasn't hiding the comments. But the issue that was referenced with regard to safety, I believe, is in a different section that was pointed out, and it really speaks to, I don't have the exact section, but it speaks to the point that the dock has to be safe, not that it is a safety issue. The dock has to be secure, it cannot fall apart. If the dock falls apart, the town will tell you to fix it, or they will fix it themselves. I've heard the case that was out here in the town where they had to correct a dock that was falling into disrepair. So the concept of safety from that section is not related to the location of the dock, it is related to the fact that you must keep the dock in a safe condition, not to cause harm to others. This dock is not being constructed to fall apart, and if it does, it will be repaired. So the argument of safety fits into that section, not into the section that we're talking about. And there were, again, I appreciate the gentleman's comments before, that the right of a riparian owner, and he is a captain, is to have a right of access, and the dock is something that I believe he was suggesting we should have. I'm trying to understand the line here, but the comments were made then that there should be no splashboards. And I find this to be remarkable, that it's always some type of horse trade. We always have to give up something because we cannot have what we should as a right, so we need to trade those things. The splashboard is in the code that is permitted. The idea of the splashboard is a safety issue. And then you hear the safety argument, and then you say, don't put in the safety mechanism. It doesn't make any sense. It's just no for the sake of no, which I know I've been in many of these meetings, and I know you all have experienced this. No for the sake of no is really not an answer, especially if we are compliant. But again, we want to be respectful of our neighbors. We've been here many times, and I hope to come to be, my client has friendly neighbors. The idea here is we're all going to try to, as was mentioned before, share. We have a right to all share in the rights of the waterways. We're not taking any rights away from anyone. The location of a dock is not taking someone's right of passage. If the concern was someone cannot pass along the shoreline, this dock can be passable along the public access points. That has been clear. I don't even think there'll be a problem if a private individual were to walk on the private property to get along the high water mark. We're not going to sit here and fight with a trespasser, quote unquote, right? So the idea that this cannot be passed is not really the argument. This is a passable section of the beach. I did want to say that I wanted to have Jack just speak a little bit to the concept of the safety issue, because I think he can speak to it better than I can. He may be able to articulate something about the marina. It's the ferry line itself. So maybe Jack can elaborate.
Before Jack speaks, I did see that John Evans had unmuted himself, and so I asked him to turn his video back on. So I'm going to call on him first, and then back to Jack unless someone else. Just on Zoom, just as a reminder for people, if you aren't able to turn your video back on, I am watching to see if you unmute yourself, and so I will reach out to you then as well. So, John?
Yeah, thanks for hearing me. I think the safety issue has been articulated very clearly and should be paramount. The threat of litigation should not control your vote at all. And as you know, as you're well aware, these Article 78 proceedings are abridged. They're like motions. So, and they're meant to it's not a full lawsuit. So basically they're motions, and the standard for challenging them is that this board acted arbitrarily and capriciously. And with the safety issue that has been explained and articulated clearly, I think it's going to be very, very hard for them to successfully litigate. The last thing I wanted to say was they talk about an elderly person getting on the boat to have a good time. Well, you know, this is a very wealthy family that are members of the yacht club, or they can go down there and drive the elderly person to the dock of the yacht club, pull up to the yacht club dock and get them on the boat very easily. Or probably use a number of other docks, you know, on the island. So, I mean, that's what I really wanted to say. The threat of litigation should not influence your vote at all, because I personally think it's not going to be successful. But beyond that, you've got to do what's right. And I think the safety issues here have been articulated between the tides, the closest to the beach club. I mean, the ferries are totally different. That's a different vessel, totally than what they're proposing and putting in here. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I did see that we had a couple of newcomers. If you can use the raise your hand feature if you wish to speak, or you can unmute yourself if you can't turn on your video, and I'll recognize you. Is this something new?
This is new.
Yes. All right, then I don't see anyone unmuting or turning the video on or raising their hand. So Jack?
So first of all, we're like 354 feet away from the bark swim area. As far as the egress goes, we could add stairs at the high tide line, bisecting the high tide line to allow steps to go across. You may be able to walk around this dock. If there's an issue where they feel they're going to be intruding on property rights, we could build a little set of egress stairs over the ramp part of the dock at the high tide line. Like I said, this dock you're going to be able to walk around this dock, but at that tide line, we could build a set of steps on either side of the dock. So if it did become an issue, there'd be stairs there to go over the dock. The other thing is, so that was 2 points. The other point is, you guys have this picture handy to look at? And this is just this. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just it's the big picture of the whole thing, includes the ferry terminal. And this is just to quickly discuss the littoral drift in the area. And if you're talking about more safety issues, the littoral drift is where the tide runs harder longer during the day, and that would deposit sand on one side of the jetty or the other. I'm afraid that Bert might be the only person that understands what I'm saying. But during the day, the tide will be running harder, longer, and that's the side of the jetty the sand will deposit. So you can see in this picture, you see, so the sand is depositing on the southwest side of the jetties here and here. That means that the littoral drift is running towards the ferry terminal, not towards this dock. So just as far as the general overall current of where the sand is being deposited with these jetties, you see what I'm saying now? The sand is building up on this side. So the littoral drift is moving from southwest to northeast. So there's more sand built up on this side of this jetty, and more on this. You can see it here too, down by the jetty. And this jetty is not in very good shape. But this jetty is, you can see quite clearly, that the tide is actually running stronger towards, towards the ferry terminal. So and you can see here, this is southwest, this is northeast.
Yeah.
And you can see here with this groin is functioning in a way that more sand is building up on the southwest side, and all of them the same way. So all that means is that the prevailing tide is running from southwest to northeast in this area, so that the ferry terminal is more of a danger than this dock, because the general current is running the opposite direction. So those are just the 3 quick points I want to make. And, and as far as the discussion of the splash board is a standard. It makes the berthing area calmer. And like I said, we can propose a conforming dock. And that'll just dictate the size of the boat. Brian was put on the spot to go, what size is the boat going to be? Well, it's going to be dictated by the size of the dock. Like I said, we can present to you a dock that completely conforms to your code. We can show that this is not really a safety issue, because the tide is generally running stronger the other direction, towards the ferry terminal. And like I said, the boat will be dictated by the dock. And I just felt that the 100-foot dock was reasonable, and the only leniency we'd be seeking instead of 1-foot contour. Not the same, everything over and over again. But if you guys have any other questions,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kirsten? I allow a second time people speak.
Being forced into grass in order to go for a walk on the beach, grass where the deer are and ticks and this, that, and the other. It's not fair to push everybody into somebody else's property to get around this pier. It's just not right. It's all this grass and yucky stuff. It's just not right. Make the beach.
You're going to want the last word.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why I'm pausing, because I know.
Yeah.
I saw Bert and then Stella, did you raise? Okay, so Bert, come on up.
Wait, since I was referenced twice, once by Jack and the other by the lawyer, I thought I'd, just go from my own interpretation. So personally, 354 feet, that's better than 10 feet, okay? But as far as the lawyer didn't address the L, he did say something about the splash boards. Personally, I think to me, a safer situation would be to allow moorings there and have a dock that you would have a small inflatable on a pulley line and pull that in, you get on that and go out to your bigger boat on a mooring. To me, that would be a safer situation than, having a larger dock where you're actually creating a berthing situation with the L and the splash board. That's just my personal opinion. I think a lot of it has to do with, the operator. I'm sure he's gonna have, this guy can afford, professional operators, so I don't think, I think that should be in consideration as well. Maybe the town puts in some regulatory buoys, more of them. But you do have flexibility to design something that you want, okay?
Thank you.
So? So good at the heights. 2 things. One, we keep talking about the 354 feet, that's from the swim road. People swim all the way up to the property lines, that's where our cabanas are. So it's less than 100 feet property line to property line. The second thing is it's probably not fair to compare the ferry. They're licensed captains, they have vessels that have dual propulsion, so it would happen this past summer. And we submitted a letter from our lifeguard where it was not the applicant's boat, but it was another mooring. And that boat on that mooring lost propulsion and they were taken by the current and they almost hit our swimming dock. So I don't think it's fair to compare a professional company that has a boat with dual propulsion. If they lost it one way, they can go the other way. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think we beat this horse to death, so I will be very brief. Again, we have presented alternatives to this board. I believe we are willing to enter into certain conditions which can be part of your approval. Again, I think the conditions that we have offered are the removal of a mooring if the dock reaches 100 feet in length, the covenant to combine the parcels, and the removal, actually it's four, the removal of the dolphin pile if we're going to consider the shorter dock to make it code compliant. Again, these are conditions that you can make if you're inclined to approve the project with conditions. And I believe the other concept was staircases that will be placed at the landward side of the dock so the public can traverse, because we, again, we will accommodate the public to traverse as they have the right to. And again, we appreciate the board's time. We would also request that the board close its hearing and render a decision. Again, we're not threatening litigation as was alluded to. We're here making a record for both sides, right? That's what we're doing. So appreciate your time again and everything in the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to suggest to the board that we close this.
I second.
I'm in favor of that. All in favor?
Aye.
Yay. We still have 2 more public hearings for those of you who are going to exit. If you could do so quietly so we could continue our business. All right, the next public hearing is for a local law amending chapter 115, taxation. Shelby?
At 6:00 PM or as soon thereafter prevailing time on the proposed local law entitled a local law amending chapter 115 taxation, Article 8 exemption for accessory dwelling units, and Article 9 tax bill enclosures.
And I believe, did we get correspondence on this one?
Yeah, I was just gonna read the Bob Fredericks.
Yes.
That he wanted read into the record.
Okay.
He sent an email. He said, Dear Town Board, again, I read in the reporter that the Town Board is considering new tax breaks for certain categories of taxpayers on Shelter Island. When do the actual taxpayers get to have input on such proposals? Or are we left to understand that 5 people know better than us what we want? Here's my input, even if you do not want to hear at least one taxpayer's input. First, I remind you that you have been raising our taxes in excess of any 2% adjusted cap every year recently. Second, I remind you that you have been drawing down on the reserve fund so that it is almost negligible at this point, and it will not be available in the future to lower our excessive tax rate. Third, regarding the proposed new tax breaks, I agree with lowering the tax rate for seniors below a certain realistic income. I also agree with tax breaks for those freely giving service to the town through the fire departments and EMS. But again, this should only be available to those who need it, whose incomes are below a certain defined income. However, I'm adamantly against additional tax money going to those having ADUs on their property. They already have gotten town and/or county subsidies to build these ADUs. They will garner serious income from these property ADUs through rent. They already decided that these ADUs were worth building before any consideration of additional tax breaks, and this will really allow the rich to get richer at taxpayer expense. Finally, you do remember that there is a water shortage growing more and more serious every year, yet you want additional structures to use even more of our fragile and limited aquifer at the cost to all of the rest of us who are striving to maintain our ecology as it is. I believe it is time that the town board realize that you were elected to represent all of us, not just special interests. If you do not realize that, you are in for a great surprise in the next election when we find a fiscally conservative town board that actually represents their constituents. Bob Fredericks, Shelter Island Heights.
Thank you. Just to reiterate, since we don't have someone, since this is our legislation, so what was being proposed here, just for the public, is and it's something that New York State put into their law so that towns could adopt or not. And so we are considering adopting. The amount that is going to be exempt is an increase in assessed value up to $200,000. So if it costs less than $200,000 to, if it's increases the assessed value less than $200,000, that would be the only amount that is exempted under this. It is also only for a period of 5 years for 100%, and then it decreases over the next 5 years. And after 10 years, there's no exemption that continues on. We also added in that it had to be registered as an accessory apartment with the building department. It has to be the owner's primary residence. The yearly rent charged to tenants, and it must be a year-round rental. And the amount charged has to qualify at or below the New York HUD fair market value rents for Nassau, Suffolk, and that the owner must qualify for the star exemption. So that's, I think, set at 250,000 or maybe 500,000 for a married couple. So yes, it is a high amount of income, but it's not for everyone. And then we had done a spreadsheet at one point that had looked at how many we have got, how many ADUs have been, accessory apartments have been built over the past few years, and it was a nominal amount. Let me just look and see what the spreadsheet was. And considering what's, what's going on with the ADU plus one program, maximum, anticipated would be about 7 per year ADUs that would be eligible for this. That would equate to, just see here. I haven't looked at this in a few weeks. So the additional exemption, if you've got 7 of them at the max, 200,000, would be an additional exemption, exemption of 1.4 million. So that tax that would be redistributed would be $2,896, which, if you divide that over 7 properties, is, I'll make the math here, my brain is fried, $400 in tax savings, which for an average median home price of 1.6 million, it would cost 69 cents in the first year of this program. Layering in over the 10 years, the maximum savings would be, maximum cost would be $4.65 for that 1.6 assessed value home. And it doesn't go higher than that other than normal tax increases, but because you have properties rolling off at the 10th year. So that's kind of an overview of the program and some of the guardrails we've put on it. So do we have anyone in the public who wishes to speak?
Bill Master. I'm going to speak in favor of this, and I think there are a few points that really need to be reiterated, especially after hearing Bob's letter, and I think Bob is really good and usually makes some good points. But one of the first things you got to recognize is this is only for new construction. When you look at this, it's a carrot, a small carrot. A baby carrot, really, when you think about it.
Yeah.
It's not a program that is necessarily going to have people flooding to do this. But I'll disagree a little with you on one thing, Amber. I think it's a plus to the tax rolls, not a negative. Because what happens is there is nothing in the current tax roll that is being diminished. There is only a delay in collecting certain new tax revenues. So you're not hurting the current people who are paying taxes. You're giving this baby carrot in the meantime to people who may be willing to have an ADU. And if at the margins, it creates more housing on the island, that is a big plus. So I know I've heard and I've had conversations with a number of friends who kind of instinctively are opposed to this, but it's not something to be concerned with. It's negligible and it's in the long run positive. Also, in the short run, if you're going to create an ADU, it may be more than $200,000 in increased valuation. So you may even get a little boost to the tax roll in the short run. I'm if other people speak, I may come back. There are two little points I'd like to make for the legislation. And I know that it's clear that it's supposed to be for 1 year. Okay, I sometimes get a little bit nervous, and I just would like to potentially say that there should be a section that just says, in order to be eligible for a qualifying accessory dwelling unit, it must be rented on no less than a yearly basis. And then importantly, that subleases, because you don't want anyone gaming the system, or short-term rentals by that lessor are strictly prohibited and will result in the loss of the exemption. The second thing would be that, and this is kind of picayune, in order to be eligible for this exemption, a qualifying accessory dwelling unit must not be in violation of any local law or be delinquent in their payments. So you don't want that to happen. And going back to one thing you had said earlier, this is something New York State put in, and other places are doing it. Albany County, Ulster County, the city of Kingston. There, if you go on the line, you can find this out. So I reserve to come back up.
I think so. That's a great, note.
Anyone else who wishes to speak on this? On the Zoom audience? Okay, then I will.
I'm not going to come back.
Okay, all right. I'm going to make a motion that we close this public hearing.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And last on the agenda, is the local law amending chapter 36, beaches and parks.
At 6:00 PM or as soon thereafter on the proposed local law entitled A Local Law Amending Chapter 36, Beaches and Parks.
Once we posted this, there was just a couple of things that we realized that didn't get included. This was 3 weeks ago. As posted, we have under the section be enacted by the town board of the town of Shelter Island as follows. And then it talks about this local law is adopted pursuant to the authority granted by municipal home rule law section. Usually that section is put down at the bottom of the resolution. And then the other thing is just a section adding the word section 36-3 of the Shelter Island Code is hereby amended by deleting the stricken words and adding the underlined words as follows. So what we had added was, they were already there. It just clarifies it for people reading this. But Thomas, is this a big enough change that we have to renotice this, or? And if you want, I can show you the two that I saw.
The text of the local law that's changing is not changing, so
Mhm.
I think it has to be.
Yeah, I felt like it was just clarifying, explaining the deleting stricken words and moving one section just down to a different part.
Yeah, I feel like that's.
Yeah, I feel like we're okay there. So I just wanted
The
to
message is
put
the
that
same.
out there.
Yeah.
But again, because we're the ones presenting this public hearing, it's just adding the way the original law was, it didn't read correctly. It said a sticker issued by the office of the town clerk to residents, and it's actually to those who are not residents that this applies to. Yes, exactly. For daily passes, 7-day passes, 1-month pass, or seasonal passes. And it just redefines the period of season from the Friday preceding the observance of Memorial Day through Labor Day to May 15th through September 15th, which coincides with all of our signage and enforcement and how we actually operate our seasonal permits. So anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this? Pam?
Yeah, hi there, good evening. I just have a quick question. This seems to be adding a definition of a resident to this chapter, and I just wondered, has the town board conferred that definition of resident to resident elsewhere in the town code? I know some of you are aware of the definitions that we've had trouble with, and I just wanted to make sure that you've conferred that. I don't even recall seeing this actually being in a public notice, but that's my comment about it. I'm just concerned that it's consistent with the rest of the code on that definition and wondered where that definition came from.
This, yeah, and thank you for pointing that out because I forgot that that was a new added section. This definition strictly applies to chapter 36. And yes, there are various places in our town code where the definition of residence is different from code section to code section. That is something that the town board has discussed over the years, and it's been kept that way. We need to do a total code overhaul, but there are times where this definition wouldn't be useful in another code section. So the decision has always been to define resident in the code sections with the definition that most makes sense for whatever the goal of the legislation is.
But then you're losing consistency with the definition of resident in the town code.
Yes, yeah, and I think ideally, in my perfect world, I would like us to finish up the comprehensive plan and then look to get a grant, which is, there are grants out there for a total, hiring a law firm to do a total code overhaul so that we're not piecemealing it as we have done through the decades. So it is something that we need to do, but it's a bigger task than we can prioritize right now.
Yeah, I wasn't really looking for that, just wondering how you came up with this particular definition of a resident and just you know, I'm sure you'll close this hearing, but perhaps in your work session, you'll maybe take that up and really feel that you're comfortable with this definition, you know, going forward. That's all. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else who has any questions? I'll make a motion to close this public hearing. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Is there anyone in the, well, actually, we'll close that we just closed public hearings. We're going back into the town board meeting. Is there anyone from the public who has any public comments that they wish to make? There being none, I'll entertain a motion to close the town board meeting for tonight.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.